their tax plan, and the House Intel Committee is interviewing the Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, Carter Page. That meeting, of course, taking place hours before former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his former business associate Rick Gates are scheduled to appear in court. Here to discuss all of these developments, NBC News intelligence national security reporter Ken Dilanian. All right, Ken, how does Carter Page play into all of this?
Good morning, Stephanie. Well, a lot of people tend to write Carter Page off as a bit player, in part because he continues to give these colorful television interviews with our friend Chris Hayes. But actually, I think the Papadopoulos plea puts a new spotlight on Page, in part because they are very similar characters. They were both lower-level foreign policy advisors who had ties to Russia. The FBI got interested in Page because he took a trip to Moscow in July 2016, and also because Russian intelligence tried to recruit him as an asset, we learned in previous court documents. And the New York Times reported that after he left the Trump campaign, the FBI wiretapped him. Now, I asked Carter Page yesterday whether he was aware that his colleague Papadopoulos had been in touch with these Russians and they were offering him dirt on Hillary Clinton, including thousands of emails, and he declined to answer, Stephanie.
Did you ask him if he has a lawyer? Because I have to tell you, every time I watch him on Chris Hayes, and I find it to be must-see TV, I think to myself, does he have a lawyer? Has a lawyer allowed him to say all this? We know who has major lawyers, Paul Manafort. What's he going to say today?
So this is a status hearing, Stephanie, sort of a hearing where they argue about the conditions of Manafort and Gates' pretrial detention. And as you know, a couple of days ago, the Mueller team filed a court document suggesting that Gates and Manafort pose a serious flight risk because of their wealth and connections and because of the strength of the case against them, including they revealed that a federal judge had already granted Mueller the ability to pierce attorney-client privilege by invoking what's called the crime-fraud exception and hauling Manafort's lawyer before the grand jury. And so they also calculated that Gates is facing more than 12 years in prison and Manafort facing more than 15 years in prison under federal sentencing guidelines if convicted of these offenses, Stephanie.
And how and why does Manafort have 3 passports?
You know, you're actually allowed to get multiple passports under certain conditions, the State Department told us yesterday, so it's not clear whether that's anything suspicious or whether that's routine.
All right, let's talk about the president. On Monday, the Washington Post reported that he was fuming in the White House residence as all of these events unfolded. But now the New York Times says President Trump himself called Maggie Haberman and said, nope, I'm not angry at all. While Gabe Sherman speaking to the Steve Bannon, I can't even believe I'm still saying the Steve Bannon side of the House, because Steve Bannon basically works at Breitbart News these days, yet he talks to the president more than ever. And he, no surprise, is coming after hard against Jared Kushner, who, by the way, we barely hear about anymore. So what's really going on inside the White House?
I think what you're seeing here is the impact of Monday. Monday was a shock and awe moment by Robert Mueller against this White House, and it had its desired effect. These indictments against Gates and Manafort were much more sweeping and detailed and powerful than even those of us who've been following this case closely expected. And then 80 minutes later, when the White House was saying, hey, this is not about collusion, this was in the past, they dropped the Papadopoulos plea, which goes to the heart of collusion, suggests he may have been cooperating. If I'm at this White House, this has got to be a stunning moment for this White House and for this president.
In terms of Trump rage, though, think back to when President Trump talked to the New York Times over the summer. And he specifically said, if Robert Mueller goes into my or my family's finances, that's my red line. And when you looked at the level of detail Mueller went into when it comes to Paul Manafort, the 8 pages walking you through exactly what he spent money on, how he spent and where, that has got to shake Team Trump in their boots. I mean, I've spoken to major Trump donors, guys who have done business with him for years, who have said President Trump does not want to get too cute because he has not run an organized business. It's pretty messy in that house. And we know Jared Kushner's family history.
I completely agree with you, Stephanie, but I also think that it has become much harder now for Donald Trump to fire or attempt to fire Robert Mueller with these very complex criminal charges on the table. Much harder than it would have been last week, Stephanie.
Well, guess what? We're going to be paying attention this afternoon. All right, Ken, thank you so much. Coming up.
Great to be with you.
NBC News.